Okay, I think we are live on YouTube again. Today's topic is what every mom needs to know about their microbiome. It is so very important that we talk about this. I wish I had known this information when I was pregnant or thinking about getting pregnant. I would even go further than that. So, who needs to hear this information? Anyone who's of childbearing age who's even just thinking about having a baby. This information would have been so helpful to me before and after giving birth. And luckily, some of the choices that were made with me, by me, and for me were in my favor, but I didn't understand them at the time. I'm going to explain to you what I mean by that. And also, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the pressure that I received. And I bet a lot of moms out there can relate to this, to actually make choices in a different direction, choices that now we are seeing are quite harmful. So, we're talking about the microbiome. And if you haven't been part of this series before, we are in the book 10% Human by Alana Collin. It's a wonderful book. And even though the information here is 8 years old, it's really, really timely. And it's a good jumping off point if you're interested in continuing to learn more about the microbiome. What I love about the book is that she takes different aspects of life and health and shows us the connection between the microbiome and what we can do to improve that aspect of life. Now, today we're talking about the first breath. This is chapter 7 in 10% Human. Actually, it's called From the Very First Breath and why it's important. She gives some really great anecdotes about animals in the chapter, kind of to kick us off, just to show how animals' behavior is actually going to feed their microbiome, especially while they're pregnant and also after they have given birth, and even during lactation for mammals, of course, that lactate. So I want to share with you something that I was thinking about, a story that I remember from when I was a kid. And so I remember watching these shows on television, these nature shows, and they would show these birds. And they said the mother bird would eat whatever food the mother bird was going to eat, and then it would vomit them. Oh, and by the way, if any bodily fluid functions are going to make you queasy or uncomfortable, this is not the episode for you. Unfortunately, we're going to be talking a lot about things like vomit and poop. And, when it comes to the microbiome, they're all really important and connected. So if this is like, oh, I'm sitting down having a nice meal, or I really don't want to hear about this, then stop back later, maybe when you are feeling better, and join us for that. But I just want to give you kind of a warning about where we're going in this episode. So let me get back to my story from when I was a child and watching these shows on television. And I remember the mother bird would vomit the food into the baby bird's mouth. And as a kid, I just literally retched at the thought of that. I thought, oh my gosh, that's disgusting. And how could that be? And, I remember if I dropped something on the floor, my mother would throw it away, right? Because it was dirty. It had germs on it. Everything was about germs, right? Don't touch that. Don't put that in your mouth. Don't touch your face. You have germs. Everything was germs. Well, I think in our desire to watch sanitation, which has a vital role in the way human beings live. So we need to be careful of pathogens that can cause us harm if our immune systems aren't strong. But we have to also be wary and very careful about obesogens, these lifelong chemicals that never leave the body, that are causing lots of problems, especially disrupting or even damaging or destroying our microbiome. For those of you who haven't been following this series, I'll just give you a quick overview about what the microbiome is. We are about 10% human, meaning that what you think you are is only made up of cells and DNA that create what you can see and what you know to be. So, you have lungs and a heart and a digestive tract. And even though you can't see those without getting surgery or an x-ray, they're there. And those cells, they wire back to the DNA that is human DNA, right? Your eyes, your skin, everything you see all that comes back to your human DNA. But your non-human DNA makes up 90% of who you are, and that's your microbiome. It's this invisible shield that covers you both inside and out. It covers the lining of your mouth, your eyes, your nose, your lungs, your genitals, your skin, your digestive system. And we already talked about your mouth, your oral cavity, inside your ears, right? So your microbiome is made up of different types of microorganisms, mostly bacteria, but also viruses and a few other types of microorganisms, not to get too technical, but these are good and they are there to actually serve you. Now, what we've learned is we have to remember to feed them. So, diets poor in fiber and other foods, fermented foods, for example, that your microbiome, bacteria, and viruses and other microorganisms like to eat, you're actually depriving your body's very, very important, remember 90%, right? So, very, very important system of the nutrition and the food that it needs. And it controls everything from your hormones to your brain to your gut brain connection to your immune system. Like if your microbiome is strong, then you are going to be healthy and you're going to age slowly and you're going to be happy and everything in your body is going to work really well. And if your microbiome is not healthy, it's not being fed, it's not being given what it needs, or even worse, if you're doing things that are actually destroying, disrupting, or starting to degrade your microbiome, then you're actually giving yourself many, many roadblocks, lots of challenges to being in full health and to living a long life. So, getting back to my baby birth story. So, I guess I just thought that the birds couldn't chew. I don't even know if I remember what the explanation was from the scientist or the reporter on television at the time. And this is going back 40 years, probably, maybe even 45 years, 50 years. And I'm not sure we knew back then exactly why mother birds would do this. We also know that certain animals actually feed their babies feces. Why would they do that? If it's a waste product, what is in the waste product that could possibly do some good? Now, we do know that it does good because these species have been alive and thriving for thousands, if not millions of years, some of them. And we know that they still continue to today. So, this idea that feces is all bad is probably a misunderstanding on our part. And not that I'm recommending that anybody feed their child their own feces, of course. There is a connection here that I want to talk about today, and that she talks about beautifully in the book. First thing that you need to know is that your microbiome will change based if you're a mother and you have conceived a child, or even you're considering conceiving a child, or even during sex, your microbiome will change to prepare your body for the potential of a new life. And what's really cool about that is that we know the microbiome actually is super smart and can adapt based on procreative activity. So now you're pregnant. What happens to your microbiome? Your microbiome begins to change and get ready for the birth of the child. And in so doing, it also is creating all of the necessary mechanisms, both through your breast milk that's going to be produced, and also in the vaginal secretions, in your amniotic fluid, and everything that's feeding the baby. It's really, really amazing to think that your body's getting set up in a way that it has to create a good environment for this new life. So, what are they finding to be a problem with non-natural births? Well, let's go over the kind of process of giving a natural birth so that you can see why you may want to choose this if you are healthy enough and prepared enough to go through a natural birth. First and foremost, your body is going to give off lots of signals and prepare itself for the birth. And so doing things from the outside that's going to disrupt that will cause challenges, even at the microscopic level. Things that we may not realize were connected, we're starting to understand that there may be a connection. So, what kind of connections are we talking about, or what kind of situations are we talking about? First and foremost, your microbiome is going to change so that when the child is born, your microbiome bacteria begins to coat the child as it comes through the birth canal. And this is really important because the child is actually born without a microbiome. It has to acquire one somewhere. And this is true of all children. And so going through the birth canal and being literally coated with the mother's vaginal secretions, this allows those microbes to start to take root on the child's skin, in the nose, eyes, ears, mouth, and go into the digestive tract. And it sets them up for success. So that's a really important thing. We used to think, oh, well, it didn't matter. And it may have even been safer to do births by C-section as opposed to a vaginal birth. But now we know that if you are born by C-section, you miss out on bathing the child in this very important microbiome microbes. And so some midwives and doctors are now understanding that swabbing the woman's vagina and then actually swabbing the baby's mouth is a good way to make sure that their microbiome starts in a healthy way, as opposed to the very sterile removal of the child by a C-section and them not having that connection. Now, one thing that no mother likes to talk about, I'm sure, when it comes to birth is the idea that when you have contractions, oftentimes you poop. You can poop during labor. And I remember thinking, this is the most embarrassing, horrific. Why didn't anybody tell anybody this? Maybe we would stop having children if we knew. It just seemed to be just such an awful thing. But in reading her book, what you realize is that actually having the poop there with the baby, which I know really was hard for me to wrap my head around, is a good thing, because the woman's digestive microbiome is then connected to the child. So the child touching the feces or even eating the feces is not a bad thing, even though it sounds really, really gross and hard to understand. During this very special moment of birth, things change. And what occurs in your body when you are not in that state is vastly different what would occur in your body if you were to be in that state. The other thing that happens is once you have a child and you start to lactate and you have that colostrum that comes first in the breast milk, all of that feeds the microbiome. And we didn't really know that before. We understood that breastfeeding, they used to say breast was best, but they didn't really talk about what's lacking in formula as opposed to breast milk. And it's not just the variety of nutrients, and it's not just the connection with the mother. It's also the microbes that get transferred. So the microbes that may come from like a cow, for example, they're there to prepare a baby cow for its digestive process and its immune system process. But if you have a human and you feed it non-human milk, you're actually depriving it of a lot of the necessary microbes that it needs to form a good microbiome. So you can do an informal kind of survey for yourself. And I have to share with you that for a long time, I don't know what happened, but I changed from being very medically focused to being very naturally focused. And when I became pregnant for the first time, I had this very, very strong innate sense that I had to really, really watch what I ate, what I did, how to protect my son. I just wanted to make sure that I was doing everything right. I read a lot of books. And I have to tell you, through my whole process, I never read anything about the microbiome, vaginal births versus C-sections. I had no idea about this information. And maybe they didn't. My children are in their 20s now. So, but instinctively, there was this instinctive feeling that I had to be really, really as natural as possible. And I understand for a lot of women, Sometimes birth is a life and death situation. Sometimes there's an emotional struggle there. Sometimes there's a physical struggle there. What I'm saying is, if you are healthy and you are able and you have this information, you can make a really good decision based on it. Information that I didn't have and my peers didn't have when we were giving birth. In fact, it was really frowned upon to have a vaginal birth. It was also very frowned upon to breastfeed. And both of those things I did, again, out of the sense of instinct, not realizing that the microbiome was involved. And maybe my microbiome was trying to tell me something. I don't know. But one of the things that she talks about in her book are what I'm going to call the A issues. So, what are the A issues? Allergies, autism, autoimmune diseases. And of course, with allergies, we also can tag on things like eczema, psoriasis. We can tag on things like asthma. These are all modern issues. And there's been a lot of speculation. Does it have to do with vaccines? Does it have to do with antibiotics? Does it have to do with lifestyle? Does it have to do with preservatives in the food? Does it have to do with the way we farm our food or package our food or cook our food or the amount of sleep we get? But what's interesting to me is that there is a strong correlation between all of those A issues and a healthy microbiome. And so, one of the things you can ask yourself or your children or the people that you know is, do you know anyone who delivered through cesarean section? And are their children plagued with any of these A issues? That's number one. Because there seems to be higher numbers of autistic kids, kids with allergies, and then adults later in life with autoimmune diseases if they were not breastfed and they did not go through vaginal birth. So it's an interesting correlation. I'm not sure we can actually move to the next stage and say it's causation. But one of the things that my business partner, Denise Schwindeman, and I talk about all the time is that when you know better, you should do better. And so I think one of the great things that can serve our young women today that Alana has done in this chapter. Now, if they don't have time to read the whole book, just have them read chapter 7 from your very first breath, because I think being prepared as a mom is really, really important. And having all the information, you can make decisions that you want to make. But if you don't have the information, then you're kind of left walking in blindly with some of this. And I don't want that to happen to the young women out there. I want them to feel confident in breastfeeding and in vaginal birth. This is all a very natural thing. It's not an illness, it's not a disease. And although the medical profession has done a lot to increase the rate of live births in the world, I think we have to be careful that we don't over institutionalize obstetrics to the point of where women feel like they have a condition or they have a disease that needs to be treated. It's absolutely not the case. You can give birth in a very, very natural way, and that starts with getting your own body healthy, working on your own microbiome, adding fermented foods into your own life. It's interesting. There was a woman who was standing next to me in the cheese aisle at the grocery store the other day, and she was pregnant, and she said, I can't eat raw milk cheese because I'm pregnant. Now, I don't know that that's true or not, but I do know that the raw milk actually has more active microbes in it and is healthier for you from everything I've been reading. Now, if you have other information to the contrary that you want to share in the comment section, or you feel strongly about some of these things that it's dangerous, then I would really love to read that. I appreciate the conversation. I'm really feeling, though, that people who have compromised immune systems, especially people who went through COVID and really, really suffered, who have long-term COVID, I think they're finding that their microbiome is actually, if not broken, it's depleted. And that some people are starting to use probiotics, for example. And when we're talking about probiotics, you really need to go with, there's only a couple on the market that even come close to getting to where she's talking about in this book. When you look at probiotics or yogurt, and I do want to put out a word of caution, if you like yogurt and you don't eat it plain, you're doing yourself a disservice. You might as well just be buying ice cream, because the minute they put the honey, the sugars, the fruits, the syrups, the fake stuff in the yogurt, it really just kills off all the goodness that you want, because sugar works against this opportunity for the bacteria and the viruses to take hold in your gut. So, how do you get used to eating plain yogurt if you don't like it? If you're used to eating things that are very, very sweet, but you want the benefits of like fermented dairy products, what do you do? What I would do is to actually just kind of literally step back from the sugar level a little bit at a time. So you may want to buy plain yogurt and your yogurt that you're used to buying. And then take a full bowl of plain yogurt and maybe put a tablespoon of the sweetened yogurt in it. And then back off from it little by little until your taste buds adjust and you can handle the tartness of the plain yogurt. I find it's not tart at all anymore. I find it delicious. I like to eat kefir. I like to eat sauerkraut, but that wasn't always the case. My palate had to change, and I changed it over time by just kind of introducing these foods little by little and tempering them with the taste that I'm used to. If you are consistent and you work at it, it will definitely change. So that would be my number one piece of advice when it comes to what probiotics you choose, what foods you choose. Just make sure that there's zero sugar in them, because anything fermented is going to just go ahead and clink onto that sugar, and the sugar is going to overwhelm it and destroy it. And we don't want that. We want it to have a healthy start inside your body. The next thing is to get really, really well educated about the microbiome, especially when it comes to birth. If you have kids with autism, then it may be their microbiome that is severely lacking. Get a stool test, find out what you're dealing with. It could be as simple as, and I'm not saying any of these issues are simple, but there could be a few simple solutions to lessen the symptoms and push you in the right direction. At least you start eating things that are going to feed your microbiome, as opposed to leaving them out or eating things that are actually destroying your microbiome. Now, what can we leave out? We want to leave out preservatives. We want to leave out isolates and emulsifiers as much as possible. I mean, really, your packaged foods are the most dangerous foods in the grocery store. So stay in the perimeter of the store as much as possible so that you're getting fresh, whole foods that you can cook at home. And if you don't know how to prepare these foods because you're used to convenience foods, let me offer you an option that I think is super easy. First, you want to figure out what fats you like, all right? Because everything in life that tastes good requires some type of fat. My top fats are going to be virgin olive oil, coconut oil, and butter. Those are my preferred. You want to try to stay away from refined oils and over industrialized oils. And a lot of people are staying away from seed oils now. That's a whole other topic we can talk about. But find fats you like, find vegetables you like, and mix them up. Don't eat the same things over and over every day. And then either learn to make or have broths on hand and spices on hand. And usually with that, you can take whatever's in your refrigerator and either create a salad and make your own dressings, because dressings are also loaded with lots of things that we have to be careful of. And sometimes a dressing is as simple as just a fat and some kind of citrus or vinegar. I love red wine vinegar and a little salt and pepper, a little garlic, and some olive oil. So that's a very basic recipe. Some people throw in a little bit of mustard to emulsify it so that it sticks together. They could chop some shallots in it. You can start to get really creative. You can put some Italian seasoning in it, whatever you like, but start to get together some of your own homemade salad dressings. The next thing I would do is keep chopped vegetables around as much as possible, because then you have three options when you have the fats, the vegetables, meats if you eat it, or other sources of protein like tofu or beans. And you can either make a salad, make a stir fry, or make a soup. And I know that might sound simple, but all of those things are easy go-tos and they can replace some of these convenience foods and fast foods. We really want to get you eating real foods because that's what your microbiome likes. All right, so just to review what we talked about today, if you are considering having a child or you know someone who's considering having a child, I would highly recommend they read chapter 7 of this book, 10% Human from Your First Breath. It's going to talk about the importance of vaginal birth, being a little bit careful when it comes to C-sections. And if you are having a C-section, the importance of a vaginal swab into the baby's mouth, what poop really does when you're pregnant and having birth, and why it's not a bad thing, and also breast milk and why breastfeeding is so very important to the microbiome. So all of those things, if you don't understand them well, you may want to do a little bit of exploring because it's fascinating science and it's also going to be practical information that you can apply today. If you are someone who made choices contrary to that and you're concerned about your microbiome or that of your children or your family members, please go get a stool sample tested. There are lots of places right now that do microbiome testing, and at least you find out where you're starting from and where you want to go. And then lastly, make sure you get rid of all of those foods that kill the microbiome and start adding the foods like fermented foods, non-sugared, that actually can regrow your biome. We can overcome all of our health issues and extend our health span and lifespan together. Thank you so much for joining me. Leave a comment if you can. A 5-star review would be great. Please invite people to listen to this podcast or follow me on YouTube. I hope this information is of value to you, and it's free. So take it and run with it. I'll see you next week.